Hey everybody. Okay, so just quick caveat, still suffering from the cold. If you've listened to the last episode about 2 weeks back, it's the same day when I'm recording this episode. I got really inspired, so I was just doing a couple back-to-back, which is actually what I wanted to talk about. So this episode, I'm discussing what I like to call my Buffalo concept. So it's my Buffalo content marketing strategy. I also refer to this as my chunking strategy. And then a lot of people talk about this as being how to repurpose content, but it's more than just repurposing content. I'm not just talking about like, yes, I will be speaking about how you get legs, how you make content with legs, how you get the most value out of the content you're producing, but not just from the merely like, let's just repurpose stuff for the sake of repurposing stuff. This is a little bit more in depth, actually a lot more in depth. So my wife and I, we went out to our favorite date spot. It's this steak restaurant. They've got great food. It's not expensive, and they always have like a really good like jazz blues band playing. So it's nice. It's really cool. So we're eating there, and we're sitting there, and I noticed that this couple walks in, and one of the people, the guy, is carrying a cinema camera, right? And so they go on and they go sit down, and my eyes immediately go towards them because, you know, filmmaker, person, cinema camera. I'm like, oh, wow, that's pretty cool. And then he just gets up and he starts like, as they put in their order, he gets up, he starts like walking around filming stuff. I'm like, well, that's weird. Why is this dude just filming stuff? He's just like walking up to random tables filming things, and I'm starting to become very critical as I'm observing this. I'm becoming overly critical, and because I'm seeing how he's filming things and how he's framing things, and I'm just like, he's filming everything from the same angle. It's not going to be interesting. He's got to like get lower or get higher or just like get a variety of shots. It's going to look dumb, and I'm just like rolling this around in my head. And then he like comes over and introduces. Now I'm like, oh, I'm friendly now, right? So like we talk, we bond, we exchange information or whatever, and then we leave. And the next day, so the very next day, I get an email from him with a link to the video that he made, right? And I go and I check the video, and I'm confirmed. Like everything that I knew when I was watching him do it, like it obvious. It wasn't like, didn't blow me away or anything. But he had posted something, and I hadn't. I was just complaining. I was making myself feel superior because but yet he was out there being visible. And although it wasn't it wasn't the video that I would have made, he made it, and it was already out there. And what struck me instantly was, well, first off, conviction. How big of a jerk am I, right? Secondly, it's kind of this concept of if a tree falls in the woods, does it make a sound? No one's there to hear it, and a tree falls, does it make a sound? If I'm not communicating what I do, how I think about things, if you're not out there marketing what you do or how you think about things, who knows about it? Do people even know? The answer is no. No one knows. So what I realized is he's out there winning. He's out there doing stuff, and I'm not. And that changed it for me. That was like a couple years back. And then that just totally changed it for me. And I was like, the only way for people to know that I do a certain thing is to show them what I'm doing and to put it out there. And so part of my content strategy is this philosophy of practicing in public, of practicing what I do, but doing that openly in public. And so this episode, in a sense, is following that philosophy, to where I'm like just straight up just letting you know, like, hey, this is what I'm doing. As a small business, every dollar counts and every decision counts. And sunk costs are, they're just scary, right? It's scary to us to like go in a specific direction that doesn't really see fruit, right? We're tasked with doing more with less, and everything that we do has to be effective because we don't have a massive budget where we can just like throw money away. Every dollar needs to count. And so that's why I love the Buffalo concept. So what is the Buffalo concept? So the Buffalo concept is basically thinking about the Native Americans on the American plains when they hunted a buffalo, as opposed to when the white man showed up with the railroads and their rifles. They hunted buffalo for sport. It was like a leisure activity. As they were going across the transatlantic railroad, they would just shoot buffalo literally from the windows. And just as the train kept going, so they would just leave like just murdered buffalo, thousands of them just rotting in the plains, right? Just completely destroyed the natives, not just their food source, but an entire resource for their whole way of life. When they hunted buffalo, when the Native American hunted buffalo, not only did they get a large amount of food, they used every piece of that buffalo. They used it for clothing. They used it for shelter. The bones became tools, right? Like everything was not like they didn't put it to waste. They took advantage of everything. And so what we need to create and what you need to create for your business is identify what your buffalo is. Like what you need to figure out what your buffalo is so that way you can hunt it. And then the point of the buffalo concept and the chunking strategy is you build a buffalo and then you chunk that buffalo out into smaller and smaller and smaller pieces, and you repurpose that content so your content has legs, so you get the most value out of it. This is about meta and multi-purpose. It's about multi-use. It's about getting the most value out of the minimum amount of effort. This is why I'm a huge fan of video. Well, no, why I'm a huge fan of video is because I wanted to be Steven Spielberg, and I love the idea of like making a film like Saving Private Ryan. That's why I started in video. But why I love video from a marketing context, right, is that its ability to just be repurposed in so many different ways and so many different varieties, and you can chunk it into multitude of different content pieces. Ultimately, and if you haven't embraced video, this is like the biggest sales pitch for you should be doing video, okay? In its essence, video, the word video comes from the Latin videre, which is to see, and audio, right, which is to hear. I don't think audio is actually Latin. I just think that's just like the audio word. So video is the combination of what is seen and what is heard. That's where you get the word video, because what a video actually is a sequence of images. I shoot in 24 frames per second, so there's 24 images per second, right, through this entire podcast, as well as the audio files. So with a video file is really, at its core base, a collection of images and audio files, okay? So you can start to see how like this thing can start to be, as you start to pull video apart into its fundamental core pieces, you can get a lot of longevity. There's a reason why I record this podcast as a video. Right? So let's just focus first, because it's simpler to understand, on one single episode. From one single episode of this podcast, I get 2 weeks worth of, at a minimum, daily content posts on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. Okay? So, and Facebook too, because Twitter cross posts to the Facebook page. But from one source, from one episode, 2 weeks worth of content across 4 different social platforms. Oh, and YouTube. 5. because we started doing the shorts thing. So let me just explain what's going on here. So this episode, right? This episode is going on YouTube. The video portion of this episode goes on YouTube. Then what we do is I take the audio portion of that. The audio portion goes into Anchor. Anchor then posts that audio portion on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and a couple other places, right? So before even changing anything, all I did was just take out and chunk out the audio source. I now have one episode across, at a minimum, 5 different places in 2 different formats. It's a video podcast as well as now it's an actual audio podcast. And so that's just the first step, okay? Then from that episode, we transcribe this episode, right? So now we've got a written version of it. We edit it and clean it up and everything. Caroline helps me with that. And then we turn that into a blog post. That blog post gets posted on the blog, obviously. When that blog post gets posted on the blog, we then post that out on LinkedIn, because LinkedIn, they love blog posts, right? It's a great place. Like, you're not on Instagram to try to read a blog post, but you are on LinkedIn to try to read a blog post. So we cross post that on the blog. Now, the other thing that benefits us is now I've got this single episode helping with SEO search on YouTube, and now we've placed that same episode in a written format on my website. So now it's helping SEO search to drive to my website as well. So I've got it searchable on two different places too. So let's just review. We've got the full episode. Week 1, we posted week 1 on a Monday. It's posted as a video as well as an audio podcast. That following Monday, we post the blog post. Okay, so the start of the week 2, we post the blog post. And this is before we start chunking stuff. This is when we're taking it within its entirety. It's already become 3 different versions of content across multiple different platforms. All right. Continuing on, we chunk out this video into microclips, a series of microclips. Okay. So we chunk it out less than 60 seconds as a square. The reason for that is because we can use that single clip, that single microclip across all of our social media platforms. So we post those microclips as Instagram posts. We post them on Facebook. We post them on LinkedIn. We cross post them on Twitter. And we also post them as stories on YouTube. So from one microclip, every single one microclip goes out onto 5 different platforms, okay? I also have to mention a lot of this information, a lot of the tactical implementation was gained from Gary Vaynerchuk's amazing, incredible deck where it's how to create 64 pieces of content in a day. Download that deck, use it as your content marketing Bible. It's awesome. So now you've got the microclips. We make anywhere from about 5 to 8 microclips per episode is kind of on average what we're able to get out. So we've got at a minimum 5 microclips per single episode. So now your episode is, you've got the video episode, you've got the podcast, you've got the blog article, and you've got about 5 microclips. Okay. Then the final thing that we do is we create a series of quote posts. So these are just like quotes that I've said, or they're summaries of what I said, or the paraphrases of what I've said within this episode. And we create about 12 of those. Okay. And those are like really easy to make because I spent a lot of time initially when I was designing the visual aesthetic of the brand. I created our own custom templates inside of Canva. Okay. And so we basically what that does is it lets me know that it's well designed because I've taken the initial time to design everything, get it exactly how I want it, right? Like exactly how it needs to say, but now I can pass that off to somebody else and they now have the freedom to just focus on the words, right? So we then create a series of quote posts. And the funny thing is that even though we're using templates and even though it's the same visual aesthetic every single time, no one has ever complained about the fact that we keep reusing the same backgrounds and it's the same text format? No one complains. Why? Because we love familiarity. We love consistency. Consistency equals professionalism, right? Like we want things to be consistent because when you see that layout and you see those backgrounds, like, this is coming from McNabb Storytelling. This is Bryce. I like Bryce. I'm going to read this stuff. I hope that's the second thought is I like Bryce. I'm going to read this stuff. You're probably not following if you don't like what you're seeing. Okay. So I could hopefully say that. All right. But it's like, so yeah, it's like, and then we make templates to streamline the whole process because again, part of it is putting in the effort and the work at the upfront, like making all the hard decisions initially. And the only way I'm able to make these templates is because I had to think through, like, what type of quote posts will we be saying? Like what's going to be necessary from a design system? And then you continue to figure that out over time. So initially, I think we had about 3 to 4 templates starting out. But then as we went on, as we're a couple months into this, we realized, wait, we really need a design template where we've got a list where we like list out bullet points. So I made a custom one for one post where we did a list. Then I created that as a template going forward. So we kept reusing that. We realized that one 5-word sentence quote wasn't enough. We needed just a little bit more information. So I then went in and designed a custom template to allow us to add in more words into it. Not too many words, so that way your eyes glaze over, but just enough words, right? So it's an organic process that isn't set in stone. You have to be malleable and know that opportunities to design more templates will happen in the future. So just be easier on yourself as you start to templatize this stuff. But going deep into templates is going to have to be its own episode because that's a bit too much. All right, we're talking about repurposing. So now, one podcast episode has now become one video podcast episode has now become an audio podcast episode, has now become a blog article, has now become a series of micro clips, which has also now become a series of quote posts. That's the Buffalo concept. And from that, we get 2 weeks of daily content postings across our top social platforms that we've identified that those are the ones that I'm focused on, right? Like that's what I'm doing. So what I try to do is batch together multiple episodes so that way I'm not like every 2 weeks trying to come up with what the heck am I going to talk about, like, no, I gives me the opportunity to sit, to reflect, to listen, to understand, like, what do you guys need to hear? Like, what was I hearing in the coaching calls? Like, what patterns am I trying to see? What questions are being asked? Like, what pieces of content are being embraced, right? Like, what's happening when I'm having my client discussions? When I'm working on client projects, like, what are they tripped up on? What can be helpful to them? These things help me understand, this type of information would be worth sharing. I tend to have the same conversations over and over. I need to make a podcast episode about that, right? So then I've got the long list that's ongoing. And then every couple months or so, I sit down, I reserve like a couple days or the whole week, and I just try to knock out an episode every day. Because if I get 5 episodes in a week, well, that's 10 weeks worth of episodes. That's over 2 months, 2.5 months of episodes that I just did in a single week, right? Which is daily content for 2.5 months that I did within a single week. So within a single week, I basically have created the entire content that I need for a quarter, just about. Okay. So you have to leverage batch process, right? With repurposing. And that'll give you this wealth of content that you have daily posts. That's building brand equity, piece by piece by piece by piece. I'm talking about the same topics over and over and over again. Like eventually that starts to solidify and consolidate my search words, my keywords. It's telling Google, oh, this guy talks about branding, marketing, customer service, customer experience. Like, this is what this guy's talking about, like that's what this website is becoming known for. And so over time, it's going to build and build and build and build. You want your end goal to be to add significant value to you, right? Like, even though I just shared with you how to repurpose stuff, you still don't have a purpose to repurposing aside from the fact of you need to put out a bunch of content. But that should never be your driving force is, oh, I have to do a bunch of stuff. If you keep in mind, like, I don't like checkbox marketing. I'm very against doing things for the sake of doing things. I believe that there should be intent behind everything that we're doing, that there should be purpose, right? And that what we're doing ought to be meaningful. We need to focus on reaching our long-term goals for our business and building towards long-term goals. Branding is about long-term value creation for the business. You also need to be doing the short-term value creation, but it's about long-term value creation. So I can't tell you what your long-term value creation is supposed to be for your business. All I can share with you is what I'm doing with my business, so that hopefully that's as an example that you can use for yourself. And what I'm building towards is ultimately it's a book. And each episode is essentially me writing the book in public. So that way, by the time I've gotten through all the core concepts and principles of this book, I now have done this in public. It's been validated. I've been receiving feedback throughout the entire time. I know what to tweak and what not to tweak. I know what to include and what to expand upon, and I know what to completely leave out, because I'm showing it to you step by step by step, and you're giving me feedback step by step by step. That's what I'm working towards, is my buffalo is the book. And my path to getting that book is the podcast. And so I'm trying to use a singular goal and a singular approach to that goal that's going to have the most benefit to my business, and then it's also going to add a multiplicity of value to my brand. So that way, as I'm working towards the long-term goal, it's also achieving short-term needs because I still get daily content from it. So essentially my encouragement to you is start to try to figure out, what is your buffalo concept? What are you working towards? What is the future state of your business that you're trying to achieve? And then what is required to get you there? What's going to add the most value to get you there? And this is kind of pulls into the conversation, this idea of obliquity. I forget the author of the book, but I recommend checking out this book, Obliquity. Obliquity basically talks about indirectly achieving goals, right? So you're trying to think of as you're trying to map out where your business is going, where you're taking your brand, you're going to, there's going to be a lot of things you're trying to achieve, right? There's going to be a lot of goals and a lot of milestones that you're going to have to hit along your path. What you're hoping for is, what is one thing I can do that indirectly achieves all the other things? Okay. For me, and where my business is going, that is writing a book. Where do you want your business to go? Where are you taking your company? Where are you taking your brand? And what then is the thing that you can create from a marketing standpoint, from a branding standpoint, that's going to get you there, and that's going to add the most value? What's your buffalo? As always, you can find me at Storytelligent on Instagram and on Twitter. If you're enjoying the podcast, I would love to receive a rating or review and hear any feedback that you have. And I will see you in the next one. Take care.